Hello, I'm Eric Duarte, and I'd like to ask you, do you think that Paul Krugman, he doesn't understand the theory of the business cycle? That's why he says a lot of silly things like he does? Or you think that he's just dishonest and paid off by the government and he's paid off to say all this bullshit?
He doesn't spend that much time studying. I mean, in the past, he has referred to the Austrian theory as equivalent to the phlogiston theory of fire, right? Which is, discredited, from the ancient Greeks or something. So he thinks it's very silly. And like I said, the comment he made saying, well, if the Austrian theory is right, why does the research show that central banks can influence the business cycle, which, is the Austrian theory? So just remarks like, I mean, that shows more ignorance than malice. That if you were just lying, you would do a better job of it, right? So again, he's not stupid. I mean, there's a lot of things you could say about him, and people say, "So are these guys stupid or evil?" And I say, "Well, they're not stupid," and then I just pause. But he is really cocky. I think in his mind he's right, and that's why he can be so arrogant about it, because in his mind he's right, and he's trying to help the little guy, and he thinks that we're paid off by big business.
Thank you.
There's a question here. How media will give, how repercutir, me fugiu. Well, how media will treat the facts of your debate with Paul Krugman? How could be the results on media of your debate with Paul Krugman?
Okay, yeah, so she's, in case, for those of you who don't know, I have a debate with Paul Krugman, and if you go to KrugmanDebate.com, you can see the silly videos I've made. So we've raised $65,000. I have a few more funny ideas. I think we'll bring in more pledges that I've been busy on and make those. If it gets above 100,000, then I think I can get the food bank to do a press release, to say, hey, Dr. Krugman, we could use $100,000, why don't you? So that's the thing. Also, just on that, again, this is nothing. This is official, but it's conceivable to me that if it ever did happen, it might be because, I got somebody who was willing to, a promoter, to put up the event and sell tickets and so forth, and the DVDs, and then maybe that person could afford to pay Krugman. So it'd be really difficult for him to turn down, the money going to the food bank, and then if someone's going to offer him a bunch of money. So if it were to happen, it would probably be along those lines. But as for right now, we do have some more funny videos in store.
We have another question. The joblessness has getting down recently in the United States. Do you think that you have a new moment again?
Yeah, again, it's a tough question. As I think Peter was saying, the Austrians are very reluctant to make specific predictions because we don't want to be wrong. But it certainly seems to me like there is an artificial bubble. So in other words, I think the U.S. economy right now is so bad that this is the boom period, even as bad as it looks. That just shows you how far down the baseline was. So yeah, the uptick in the unemployment, or so the increase in employment figures, I think is not a long-term trend. For sure, I don't think that we're just going to gradually grow out of this and the unemployment is going to recede and we'll just be back to regular times and that the monetary base is going to shrink and nothing will happen. So I don't know when it's going to hit or what's going to happen, but I do think, for example, that the stock market's going to crash. Like if you look at a chart of the U.S. stock market, I'm not saying the Brazilian, but the U.S. stock market, from your perspective, it goes way up in the late 90s, crashes, then up again, then crashes, and now it's like, about halfway retracing that last one. So to me, it's not going to surprise me if it goes up and then crashes, because when it's been rising, it's been because of the QE1 and QE2. So to me, this so-called recovery looks completely artificial, and I think if they stopped all the stimulus, it would all fall out again. And so it's, so yeah, the increase in the employment figures, I think, is a temporary thing.
Ali tem uma pergunta.
The question is about people and media expect that economists make forecasts. As the economic school can't do this, do you think that this is something that will make that never made the Austrian school something that will be the mainstream because it's not our business to make the forecast. Then we will not be in the newspaper.
Well, and again, that's partly what I was doing with this presentation is, I'm of the various people associated with the Mises Institute in the United States, I deal with the empirical data a lot more, and so it's like Peter Schiff, for example. I mean, we all love the fact that you can go, Peter Schiff was right, and see him calling the housing bubble and, all those other people looking wrong. And so it's good that he did that, and it gives credibility to the Austrian school. The fact that we were against the Obama stimulus package, and then look what happened. And so these things look good. So, does that mean the Austrians should therefore be building quantitative models and saying we think in third quarter 2013 this is going to happen? Probably not, but I do think the Austrians can see long-term trends or certain macro events better than Keynesian economists. Just if for no other reason, I mean, our views are so different. If the Keynesians think that this stimulus package is going to improve things and we think it's going to make it worse, I mean, that's a pretty big divergence that you can certainly distinguish your outlook from the Keynesian.
I just want to understand something that you said a little bit better. You said that instead of having after the housing bubble, instead of letting the government have the stimulus, you should let the free market rearrange itself by himself. And how does that work? How does that process work?
Well, if the Fed and the federal government hadn't done anything, it would have been really bad for probably 6 months. So housing prices would have come way down. There would have been outright price deflation. That CPI probably would have dropped maybe even 10%. A lot of financial firms would have gone bankrupt, but it would have bottomed out, and then the benefit would have been the people that made the worst mistakes during the boom would no longer have any influence over resources, whereas right now, the same 100 guys that were responsible for the credit problem during the bubble years are still basically in charge of the U.S. financial sector. So, that, they didn't learn anything, and it's the same people running the show. So the thing is, real wealth is not destroyed just because of falling asset prices per se. And so it's just a rearrangement of the ownership of the stuff. And so I think it just would have transferred ownership away from the people who made the worst mistakes, whereas now what happened is the people who made the mistakes were bailed out and the losses were spread among everybody.
Hi. Talking a little bit about the United States crisis that you were talking about, given the fact that we live in a kind of a Keynesian era, and given the fact that the college students are like studying the status quo of the government and everything, if you were the senior advisor to the President Obama during the period of the crisis, what would you tell him to do in the Austrian way for him not to get impeachment after him? Which is how would you implement Austrian measures without having the president being taken away from office?
Well, the first thing I would tell him is to resign. And I mean, of course, I'm trying to make a joke, but also in all seriousness, I mean, that's, for those of you who don't know Robert Higgs, he had a theory about regime uncertainty, and the business people distrusted Franklin Roosevelt, in the 1930s because Roosevelt's rhetoric was very anti-business, and the true recovery didn't really begin until after Roosevelt was dead and Harry Truman was in there, and so partly it's because World War II was ending, but also just, a lot of the business people really believed that Roosevelt was trying to become a dictator. He was the first American president to serve more than 2 consecutive terms and so on, so it looked like he was trying to be like Stalin and Hitler, but obviously more liberal because he was an American. And so a lot of the business people didn't trust him. And so that, Robert Higgs says, one of the necessary preconditions for genuine recovery was to get Roosevelt couldn't be in charge. And I think it's the same thing in the United States. I'm not kidding, that with Obama in charge there, I mean, a lot of it is even unfair. A lot of the crazy rhetoric from people on the radio against Obama, it's not even fair. But the point is, certain people literally think he is from the devil, like literally, like they believe that religiously. And so, I mean, it would be hard to get people to go back to normal with that sort of mentality. So the more serious answer to your question, I mean, I don't know whether it would be feasible. I think it would be, actually. In the United States, I mean, people are talking about austerity. There's what's called the Tea Party. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with that. So Americans are a lot more serious now about strict measures, and I think if somebody really did sit, like Rand Paul, for example, is saying, look, we have to cut spending $500 billion this year. And it's not, that would have been considered insane if he said that a year ago, but now a lot of people are saying, yeah, that sounds good, because it doesn't even eliminate our deficit. So, I mean, just massive budget cuts, and then I would tell the Federal Reserve, link the dollar back to gold and start, like as assets mature, don't keep rolling them over. Don't keep buying more treasuries. Either let the base shrink, or if you want, start stockpiling gold so that, investors believe the peg to gold, that you can back it up. But, I mean, that's really the only thing you could do. And certainly stop, get rid of the healthcare legislation and all those other things that they're talking about. But I really think there's no magic solution, just they have to cut spending drastically. And the way they could partially offset that is they could sell a bunch of assets, that the federal government owns a lot of mineral resources, oil and things like that. Just ironically, just so you guys know, when President Obama visited here recently, the thing that outraged a lot of people in the United States is he promised American taxpayer support for you guys to develop your offshore oil development, whereas he still has lots of regulations on U.S. companies not being able to drill off the United States. And so it's like U.S. taxpayers are paying the Brazilian government to help you develop your oil, but we can't, develop ours, and we have to import it. So it's things like that.
What do you think about